Hi there. It's been so wonderful to work our way through the book of Acts, and we're just carrying on through it today. That's all we're doing. We're just going to carry on. I don't know if you watched the live stream last week or were in your congregational building or outside worshipping together and heard the passage from last time, but we're just picking up from where we left off. Acts chapter 13, verses 42 to 52, which has already been read to you. We're going to just work our way through that today. And as we look at, just right off the bat, picking up verse 42 to 44, I want to just say what a difference a week makes. It's been such a stark contrast, isn't it? You had Paul and Barnabas, and they were being begged to carry on sharing. And they had a gathering that followed them as they left. And then if you skip to verse 44, the next Sabbath, nearly the whole city assembled. But the Jews saw the crowds, and they were filled with jealousy. And what they've had is a really stark warning, didn't they? In the previous passage from last week, they had a warning. The Jews had a warning. They were warned to respond to Jesus, not to reject him, as so many other Jews had done. Just the ones that crucified Jesus, they rejected him, didn't they? And they're warned by Paul and Barnabas about the dangers of rejecting Jesus in verses 40 and 41 of this passage. And that's started to happen already. Hasn't it? In this contrast between one week to another, you get some Jews. And we're going to explore why that might be as we look at this, as we carry on. We'll explore a little bit of a few thoughts I've got on that. Where I wanted to kind of pick up next and really start with is the importance of the message for the Gentiles. And just pick this up and run with it, because you see that in this passage, that it's for the Gentiles. And it's nothing new. Is it? It's nothing new. We should know that. We should be aware of that. I mean, many of us would be considered Gentiles. I have no Jewish heritage whatsoever. And it's wonderful to be included in the blessing that flows through the Jewish heritage. What a blessing it is to flow and be a part of that. But the message was always for the rest of the world, wasn't it? And you get these verses that are in verse 47. I have placed you as a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the end of the earth. And that's taken from Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6. You get a bit of it, and the full verse is taken from Isaiah chapter 49, verse 6. And it's there in the Old Testament, and it's even before that, isn't it? I'm sure you know this. You get the promises to Abraham, don't you? Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. This is so early on in the Bible, so early on in the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, the promise and the covenant that's made with God and Abraham is, in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. In you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. This was always, of course it was, always God's plan, wasn't it? To bless the whole of the earth. Always. That all may know him. That all may have relationship with God our Father. That all may come into relationship with him and know the blessings that flow through him. To be part of his future kingdom that's being brought in, Jesus' kingdom. All of them, everyone should be part of that. And this is not a new message. It's not a new thing. It's all the way right back at the beginning. But the Jews are not so happy about it, are they? They're not so happy about it. And it's a challenge. They should be aware of it. I think Israel was always meant to be this light to the nation, wasn't it? Always. A light to the nations. To be different. To show a different way. To be in relationship with God and bring others and join them in from the edges and be part of that. And the fullness of that, obviously, is now being fulfilled through what Jesus has done. That promise that it is for every nation. Through Abraham's line, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. But the Jews, they react, don't they? They react to it. And it's not to say that all did in this passage, not all that were there, but they reacted. They reacted badly. They didn't want it to be shared. They also, basically, I want to pick up on a couple of things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look at 3 barriers to the gospel and 3 barriers to spiritual growth, which are essentially the same 3 barriers. Because I want to apply it to our own lives. I want to apply it to those as we reach out and looking at this text. And the 3 barriers I want to pick up on are timing, so the timing of scenarios, where people are at, what's going on, the timings of things. Jealousy as a barrier, and exclusivity as a barrier. There are three things. And there are others. Of course there are. There are many others. But there are three things I just wanted to pull out from this passage I felt the Lord was putting on my heart. And first thing is timings. As I said, what a difference a week makes. Timing can be such a barrier to the gospel. You know, where are people at? Are they ready to receive the good news? Do they care? Is their heart in a place where they're actually even soft and receptive? It's such a barrier to the gospel. They might not be. It might not be. The timing might be wrong. For whatever reason, personal circumstances. Maybe we missed the moment. And I don't know. I don't want to read too much into this story. I don't want to judge what's going on here. But it is a lesson that we can certainly apply to our own lives. Is timing is key. In this story, you have Paul and Barnabas who have shared the word, and they're begging them to carry on, and that these things might be spoken to them at the next Sabbath. And it says, now when the meeting of the synagogue had broken up, many of the Jews and the God-fearing proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, speaking to them, urging them to continue in the grace of God. And I don't know, like, it's wonderful that some have clearly chosen to follow. Some are clearly wanting to follow Paul and Barnabas and learn and hear more about Jesus. And maybe that happened through the week. But is there a moment there? And I don't want to judge them too much. I don't know. I'm maybe reading too much into it. But certainly in our own lives, there can be times and moments where we might be in a meeting and there might be people who are hungry to hear more. But we just close the meeting down because it's the end, and that's naturally what happens. Or maybe we have something pressing coming next, and we move on, and you miss the moment. You know, people are hungry in that moment. They're ready. They're receptive. They're waiting. And a week can make a lot of difference. And it's a challenge to us to be soft to what's going on, sensitive to the Spirit, to be flexible. It can be quite hard sometimes to do that. You know, it's the tension of having a program and structure and being soft and flexible and moving with the Spirit. And we need to find a way to navigate through that. But if somebody is ready to respond to the gospel, it's so key to make time for that, isn't it? Not to miss those opportunities. Timing is important. You don't want to miss the opportunity. Who knows what will happen in a day's time, in a few days' time, in a week's time, in a month's time, when you next have the opportunity to share in whatever capacity it may be. You know, maybe something's happened. They're just shut down. Maybe something of hardness of heart has come in. Maybe the enemy has just snatched away the seed in some capacity. Who knows what's gone on? And timing is key. Let's not miss timing. Let's be sensitive to what the Spirit is doing. Next barrier is jealousy. Jealousy is pretty ugly, really, jealousy, isn't it? It's not a nice thing. It's not a good thing. And here we have, in verses 44, we have these few verses. And it's amazing the picture that has been, that's been painted here, in that the whole city has turned out, it says. Or nearly the whole city, I think it says. Yeah, nearly the whole city has showed up. There's a hunger to hear more and to know more. And so maybe this timing thing doesn't apply here anyway, who knows? But because the whole city have turned up, so there's an opportunity there. But this timing here, this incredible, that the city has shown up. Can you imagine that? Can you just imagine the deadness on the streets and people's homes? Everyone's out, everybody's ready to listen, everyone wants to hear, the crowd is there. It must have been wonderful, it must have been special, it must have been such a wonderful moment. And here they are, ready and prepared to hear. And it says in verse 45, when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and began contradicting the things spoken by Paul and were blaspheming. Something in them in that moment goes, look at all these people. I want to stand in opposition to this. I'm jealous of the fact that they've got all of these people here. You know, who knows, it might have been the religious leaders or other teachers who normally only have a few people who come, or whatever it may be, and they're jealous of the crowds and the audience that they're getting. It's such an ugly thing. And the implication here is that because of that jealousy, they deliberately contradict what Paul says. Maybe they don't even disagree with what Paul and Barnabas are sharing, but they deliberately contradict him. And they're starting to cause trouble. It's such an ugly thing, isn't it? And they were blaspheming. They were blaspheming. They were going against God's purposes and plans. And it's wonderful, isn't it, the transition, I suppose, here that's now happened in that blaspheming is being used in the context of the church and Jesus, when actually it would have been blasphemous for what Jesus was saying before he died and rose again. And that transition of that word use here in Acts is just, I saw that and I thought that was interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? It's such a ugly thing, jealousy, coming back to it. And I think we need to watch that. You know, people who come in and press in and want to destroy what we're doing because they're jealous with what the church is doing, whether it's trying to snatch glory from which isn't deserved for us anyway, it goes to Jesus. But as the church, as we're reaching out into the community, I think of projects where actually, as the church, we've been so instrumental in reaching out into our communities at this time in the COVID pandemic, to love people, to provide for them, to help them. And I think sometimes people are jealous of that, or even forget that the church does that. I want to tear it down. And it's so ugly. Or they want to water down what the version is and the reason we're doing it. We're doing it because of Jesus and the fact that he loves us and wants us to reach out to others in love because he loves us and wants to reach them and loves them and wants to have a relationship with them. And they want to remove that. They want to remove Jesus from that. Even though he's at the center of the very reason we're doing it. And sometimes I think people are jealous because, again, like this, they see a crowd, they see some sense of authority that might be there. They don't quite get it, but they're jealous of it. And that's a barrier to the gospel, isn't it? Because suddenly you go, I'm jealous, of that. And it gets in the way of actually seeking the Lord and wanting relationship with him. Because you want what they have, that authority, you're kind of jealous of it, and then you seek to destroy it. I guess there is a sense that you might see it and you might be a little bit jealous of it and want a part of it, but that's not at all what's going on here. There's a sense of actually, no, I want to tear that down. That's horrendous, and that's a real barrier to the gospel. Third barrier is exclusivity. That sense here, I guess, of the Jews. They want it for them and haven't laid hold of the fact that it's for the Gentiles too, and it's always been for the Gentiles and always meant to go to all the nations too. And there were many laws about blessing the foreigner and sojourner in your lands and trying to look after them and drawing them in and making them part of what Israel is. And so it has always been there. It's always been there. And the fact that it's there in this Abraham covenant that we see in Genesis 12:3, it's always been there. But still, there was an exclusivity, wasn't there? And not wanting people to be part of it and join in. And it's for us, and you're not a Jew, and it's not for you. And it's so not what is in God's heart. And it can be a barrier to the gospel, exclusivity. You think of it in this sense of today in our churches, what that looks like. Because it can happen. When somebody joins your church or somebody new comes to your church or joins what you're up to and it comes along, it changes things. It's a dynamic. And you might want to keep this nice family feel that's there in your congregation and with all the wonderful relationships that are formed and developed and grown. And then somebody new comes in and they've got to adapt to that, and it changes the dynamic. It changes the relationship. Actually, some people we like, and I like small churches. I like the sense of family that is achieved by them. And as you get bigger, it's harder. It is harder to maintain that. I think there are ways you can do it, but it gets very difficult once you keep growing. But the real danger there is that you then stagnate and you don't really want to grow because you want to keep that sense of community, that sense of shared life, that family. You want it to be exclusive. Isn't this great? It's for us. And that's not okay. It's terrible. It's terrible. The whole point is it goes for everyone. It's terrible. It cannot be kept to us. It's not for us to do that. Actually, it's for us to share it. Never let us do that. We don't want to keep an exclusivity. We want to make sure our meetings are welcoming to people, that we deliberately go out of our way to say hello to people, welcome them in, and join them into the part of the family. And sure, we need to guard against maybe people coming in or the enemy sending people. We need to be careful of that, totally. But at the same time, so that means we need to discern what's going on. At the same time, we must be welcoming and warm and friendly, particularly for those who are genuinely seeking. And be prepared to change. A congregation should always be changing. We should be used to that. We should be adapting to that. Church life should be growing and changing. And if it stagnates, there's a problem there. But we want to see growth. And that means there needs to be change. It means exclusivity cannot happen and shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be there at all. May we always be welcoming and loving. There are three barriers to the gospel and us reaching out. And I want to take those three and apply it, I guess, to barriers for our own spiritual growth in our own lives. Timing, again, spiritual growth. It's the same sort of principle. Timing is important. It really is. I think one of the hardest things with the prophetic is timing. Knowing, hearing God and saying He's spoken, He said something, and it's this. But the question is, when? How does that apply? When is that applying? Discerning that, I think that can be difficult. But timing is key. Timing about, not missing the moments in our meetings. Even on a really simple level, at the end of a meeting, our response and what that looks like, not to miss that moment. Again, we need to be mindful of the clock and not keep people back for long times, and our meetings should have a sense of structure and order to them, and we shouldn't run over massively, but we also need to be flexible and make sure we make time to respond. Responding is important. Not missing the moments. I think it's really important that gift of discernment I mentioned already, to have that, to discern where people are at. Discern where, how are they doing in our congregation? How am I doing? When God speaks into our own life, not missing the moment. When God points His finger in a meeting on something in our hearts or our lives, some sin that needs change, dealing with it there and then. Because often we walk out, don't we? And miss the moment. There's a song by Casting Crowns, and it's about between the altar and the door. And it's a really challenging song. And it's all about that, how actually in the moment in our church meetings, in the worship, whether we might be so, feel the Lord speaking to us and challenging us about something, and we might be, we might even have tears coming down our faces. The Lord does something in our hearts and our lives. But the challenge then is not to just get up and walk out and nothing changes. By the time we hit the door, everything's gone back to the way it was. No, we need to make sure that in the moment where the Lord has done something in our hearts and lives, where He's putting His finger on something, where He's bringing healing, where He's doing something, whatever it may be, that we don't miss that moment between the altar and the doorway as we leave. Stay there. Let's do it now. God's doing something. He's saying something. Listen to Him. Let's react. Let's respond. Let's not walk out of our churches unchanged. We want to leave having changed, having met with the Lord. Amen. So that's the timing, barrier to spiritual growth. What's the Lord saying? Let's not miss our moments with Him. Jealousy in our own lives, in our congregations. It can happen. It can happen. Are you jealous? Are you jealous of your brothers and sisters' possessions? Are you jealous of their house, their home? Are you jealous of their gifting, their ministry? Are you jealous of whatever? Is it there in any way? It shouldn't be. We need to deal with it. It's really ugly. It can tear down. It could divide. It can wreck that family that we've been talking about and thinking about. That's so wonderful, that church family that we want to keep and preserve. We need to be really careful about not letting jealousy come in. We can appreciate each other's gifts, and we can appreciate, their home and be part of that, and we can appreciate, but not being jealous. Not letting those thoughts creep in of, why don't I have that? I want that. Why don't I have that? And that grumbling and that ugliness. If it starts to happen, if you see it developing, because it's not an overnight thing, it's a process. It takes time. It doesn't just go, I'm jealous. No, actually, you let things fester, thoughts fester. You dwell on them. Don't let that happen. Don't let that happen. We can't. It can't belong in our churches and our congregations, in body life. It shouldn't be there. Exclusivity. I guess it is quite linked really to that gospel in the context of people coming into our churches. We shouldn't be exclusive. We shouldn't be exclusive. We need to do that. And I think as well in our own spiritual growth within church life, not developing cliques. I'm sure we will naturally have friendships that are stronger with other people in our congregations and our lives. But we can't have that sense of little cliques within a church, divisions within a church, small groups, this type of person, this type of, that's not the kingdom, it doesn't belong there. we need to bring in the kingdom now. I'm sorry, you know, let's deal with it now, and let's have a sense of real shared life and fellowship together of all the different types of people that we have in our churches and the different occupations and backgrounds, all of that, everything that's different. And it's such a worldly thing to form relationships with people that are the same as you. It's not church, it's not the kingdom. It's the celebration of Jesus' kingdom, is the diversity that comes into it. It's wonderful in that we're all going to be standing together. Every tribe and tongue are going to be standing shoulder to shoulder, and we're going to be worshiping him. Let's get used to it now. Let's not have divisions and cliques. We should be welcoming. And we should spot when people are feeling a bit isolated within churches and make sure they're not, and draw them into our friendships and our shared life together. Let's all be inviting people over to our homes when we can. Everyone, let's have everyone over from our churches into our homes at some point in the next 5 years. Let's do it. You know, I don't know how big your church is. It's smaller, you can do it quicker. But if it's a big church, let's get them all over 5 years. That's a great target. Come on, let's do it. No, we should be having everyone round. We should have no exclusivity, no cliques within our churches. It's just not, shouldn't be there. And it's a barrier to growth. It's a barrier to our own growth. It becomes very narrow-minded and one track if we only ever have friends that look like us or act like us or work like us. It's not at all right. Such richness in the different backgrounds we can have in our churches. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes on before I close is how do we respond to rejection as well? I mean, really, it's the rejection of Jesus, is it not? If people reject the gospel, they're not really rejecting us. We get offended because we identify with Jesus, and that's not a bad thing. But they're rejecting him. They're rejecting Jesus. And how do we respond to that? How do we respond to rejection of the gospel, the good news? How do we respond to the rejection of Jesus and us identifying with him and being a little Christ, a Christian, a follower of Jesus? I don't know. How do you do that? I love the response here that you get from Paul and Barnabas, which is, you know, it's what Jesus taught to the disciples. Shake the dust off your feet as you go. That's what Jesus said. And that's what they do. They shook off the dust of their feet in protest against them. I like that, in protest against them. They shake off the dust off their feet and they go. And it's, you know, what does that mean, I guess, is just unpack that briefly. Let us remove everything from that place. Every bit of dust, every dirt, let's wash ourselves off of that. All of their ideas, all of their experiences that they might have said, all the words that they've said against us, cursing it might have been, whatever it may be, let's shake that off of us. Shake the dust of our feet. Wherever we have trod, let's remove those particles from that place and shake it off and leave it there and take nothing of that with you. And I think sometimes we need to do that. When we do church on the street, we haven't done it for a while because of the restrictions, but when we do church on the street, and we would always, when we were out on the street, when we came back, we'd pray for one another, and we'd pray that we would be washed, that anything that anybody who said that is not of Jesus, whether it might be an unclean spirit or whether even it's just an unkind word or anything that's just not of Jesus, may it be gone. Let nothing of the enemy, let nothing that is not of Jesus stick to us. Wash us. That's what we would always pray when we came back from church on the street. Wash it off of us, Lord, that we may go in the fullness of your blessing and nothing of the enemy stick to us. Because these things can take root after time, don't we? And let's wash ourselves of it. And I think the lesson as well, just drawing from this and taking and picking up on timings, is to move on into a more opportune moment, a more opportune time. That's the other thing, is we shake off the dust and we carry on and we go on and we might come back. It's okay. You're not saying I'm never going to come back to this place ever again, condemn it forever. No. But you might come back at a more opportune time. Perhaps when the person has a softer heart, if it's a conversation you've got, Perhaps in a region, if you're doing community outreach or an estate or whatever, come back at a more opportune time. If the Lord's spoken and you're not seeing the fruit of it yet, either you need more breakthrough and need to keep praying, and it might be the Lord saying that, or it might be actually was saying, sorry, your timing's a bit wrong here, come back later when things are ready. Or do a bit more prayer walking. Let's prepare the ground. The other thing is, how do you respond? And I love this response. The last verse, verse 52, and the disciples were continually filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. That's not bad, is it? That's a way to go. That's what we need as we leave a place. Perhaps we've met opposition or resistance. We need it always, but yeah, let's go in a sense of joy and with the Holy Spirit, being led by him, full of his joy, full of his life. That's the way that we should be living in all things. That's how we should leave places. I'm just going to share a couple of things just as a response quickly, or ideas for a response. And I'm sure I'll pick them up now as the Lord leads. So my first question is this: are we trying to do things in our own timings? Thinking about us now. Are we trying to do things in our own timings, not the Lord's timings? Have we got it right? Maybe there's a scenario you're thinking of right now. I don't know. But have a think. Is that the case? Is there any sense of jealousy in your heart of other believers, other members of your church family? Again, have a think. I'm not talking about dredging stuff up in our hearts, but is there anything that's come to mind as I've been sharing? You know, we need to deal with that. Is there something beginning that needs dealing with now before it festers and grows and causes division and breakdown and damage to ourselves as much as anyone else? Do you want to share your church or keep it to yourself? Do you like the way your church is? Hopefully you do, and that's a great thing. Are you prepared that it may change and grow, and there might be other people, and the feel of it may change and grow, but that's okay. Are you prepared for that? Are you prepared for that? We need to be. We need to be. We need to be flexible and ready for change in our churches. And finally, has there been an incident where the dust has not been shaken off? Perhaps you've had something like an exchange, or somebody said something against you, or a word against you, or cursing. It might be as strong as cursing. I don't know. Or maybe it's just a really unpleasant exchange in some way, whether it's the workplace, a bus, or who knows, in the traffic. You know, sometimes in traffic we get a bit of road race. You feel like I've done nothing, but people shout at you. And we got to wash that off of us. Don't let that stick. Is there something that hasn't been dealt with? Let's deal with it today. And also, you know, let's be prepared and remember to take that action to wash things off of us when we do have those times. You know, sometimes it's good to always just, if you've been through that and you feel shaken, go and ring somebody and say, I just had this experience. Can you just pray with me? Let's deal with it now. I'd encourage you to do that. Brilliant. Well, that's enough from me. Bless you. You take care.